Good afternoon, my IOL students. This is Absalom Kahumba, and I'm your tutor for Natural Science and Health 1. I'm actually going to present to you the conduct-based, examination-based class. And here you have my details should you have questions that you actually want to use. Should you have any questions or perhaps any information that is related to this course that you may require, so you can always contact me on the following number, which is 0811246753, or you can use my Gmail account, which is akahumba@gmail.com. So as I said earlier, this is an examination-based conduct class. So what I'm going to present to you, I'm not going to present to you the questions, but I'm actually going to present to you some of the topics that are related to some of the aspect or contents that are basically going to be in the exam, but not necessarily questions. The first aspect that I need to present to you is actually the core function of the public health. There are actually about three core functions of the public health. The first one being the assessment and monitoring of the health of communities and population at risk with the purpose of actually identifying the health problems as well as priorities. The second one is actually the formulation of public policies designed to solve and identify local as well as the national health problems and priorities. The third core function is actually to ensure that all people have access to appropriate and co-effective care, including health promotion, disease prevention services, and also evaluation of the effectiveness of that care. So as you can see on your on my far right, there's actually a pie that indicates the assessment and then the policy development as well as the assurance, which are the core functions that are set into place. But there are also other aspects that are found through that. But the central base or the core main aspect there is actually research. So the other thing that I need to present to you is actually now on how to on how sound from the learner's local environment are transmitted through the air. So I'm going to now show you as to how the sound from your local environment is being transmitted through the air. So most of the questions that we usually ask yourself, or you can ask yourself, some of the questions, they actually listed here below. You can ask yourself why is sound clear at night and when it's cool. So you mainly have probably experienced that already, that the sound is quite clear at night and only probably when it's cool, like when it's cloudy or it's not windy at all. So the other question that can also come into your mind could be that if humans could react to all the sounds they can hear at one time, what would it be? Will it not be a disaster, or will it be a disaster or not? So that was one of the second question. So the other one could be that what sound do you hear at night that you cannot hear during the day? So some of those are some of the questions that you can still ask yourself, and this is basically just to enable us to have an understanding that vibrating objects produce sound. Normally, all vibrating objects do produce sound. So these are some of the questions that we may need to ask ourselves in order to find out why or how sound from learner local environment being transmitted through the air. Excuse me. So how sound in an environment are transmitted through the air? This could either be that during the cool air has actually a high speed of sound, and this is mainly because the cool air particles are compacted and close to one another, and that enables the sound to be much faster. So that makes now the sound wave actually travel faster because the vibration from one particle to another is faster, and there is always a lower thermal dispersion or to diffuse the sound energy. So basically, what happens is that when that vibration comes, and when the particles are very quite close to another, so it's much faster when they are more dispersed from one another. So, but now when they are when this happens, and also when it's quite cool, so there is less diffusion of the energy, so or sound energy. So additionally, it could it's quieter at night, so your brain may not have or your brain does not have to filter out many sounds from one another. So like during the day, there are so many sounds that you can hear, so that is a bit of a disaster. But at night it's a bit cooler, so it's quieter, and then your brain actually has ability to now filter out what sound that you perhaps you have to hear, because it's quieter at night. So the human brain is equipped with actually a sensory filter that actually filter all sounds that is being received through our ears. So all the sounds that we hear, you can actually filter them out. You can now sometimes hear that there are so many sounds, but you may just filter one that you actually want to listen to. The sound that seems interesting or felt or sometimes frightening is usually processed such that it requires a reaction from the person. So this is how you sometimes actually react. Maybe if it's a bang that is more hard, or sound that comes from a hard object, you are likely to listen to that. Or a sound that may be interesting, maybe a piece of soft music. So you find that that is more processed because it requires a reaction from actually an individual. So, and if human could react to all different sounds from maybe living or non-living things, which who are mainly around them, they could go crazy because there are so many sounds around us that we might hardly find. Mind or that we hardly mind all of them. So we don't mind all the sounds. So we only mind to the one that we feel that is more interesting and or frightening, because that's what we need to sort of pay attention to. So these are just some of the ways of how sounds are being transmitted through the air, and it's much easier at night when it's quieter and when you have cool air. So because sound travels much faster, or sound energy travels much faster in when it's cool or at night. The other aspect that I actually like to present to you is the light. Uh, Light is actually our most important aspect because it is actually produced by the sun. The sun is our primary source of light. So, and the light normally travels in a straight line and at a speed of about 186,000 miles per second. So it travels at a supersonic speed. So that is very fast. So which means it travels very fast, but but rather travels in a straight line. So basically, you can find that light waves travel faster than the sound waves. So we were already looking at the sound, that is travels much faster, but light travels much faster than the sound because of the sound. Of the waves that it has, and it travels in a straight line. Light energy, mainly from the sun, travels through space, and it also reaches the earth and some of it also turns into heat energy and warm the earth, Earth's air. So the air that we get, the energy that we get from the sun, does not only come direct to us or to the earth, but it has also to warm, because it passes the space, reaches the earth, and also some of it now get turned into heat energy, which has also to warm the air and then the earth itself. So as you can see on my far right here, this light wave that indicates how the light waves behaves. So it's an indication that it moves either sideways or forth and backwards, but it's usually in a straight line. The light from the sun also travels to the cells of green plants. Plants actually produces, and is stored as energy. So you find that plants normally absorbs the green light. The light through the green pigment, which is chlorophyll, that is found in the plant chloroplast. That is basically in the plant cell, and that's where that's how photosynthesis actually takes place, and that's what makes a plant actually a producer, because it converts that when it combined with the carbon dioxide plus water, and you have now your carbohydrates and the oxygen being produced. So that's how the process goes. Now, when the light reaches an object, it actually get absorbed, or sometimes it get reflected, or sometimes it also passes through it. So that's how it behaves. So whenever it is an object, it can either be absorbed depending on the material itself or the material of the object. It can absorb it, or it absorbs heat. Not heat, but rather light. And sometimes you can find that the light is being reflected either backwards or sideways, but sometimes it may be able to pass through it, even depending on the surface of the object. So sun is actually our main source of light. It doesn't mean there are no other lights or other producers of lights, so there are also some other different sources of light. So we can also have light from some of the other insects. As you know, some of the insects normally produce light. They beep. Normally you only find that at night, and you also have fire itself also provides light. Lightnings, maybe flying plane, or you can also get that from torch, or somewhere during Christmas. Some of you were actually celebrating, and those lights that you had for celebration of Christmas or New Year, those lights also also produce lights. Those are some of the lights or other different sources of light, but our main primary source of light is actually the sun. Excuse me. There are now different mediums in which light should pass through. So just passing through an object. So what happens when light strikes a glass or waxed paper or a book? So those are some of the objects in which light either has to pass through. But if light travels through an object, it's actually that object is regarded as transparent. But if the light is blocked by an object, and the dark shadow it's cast, it is actually that object is regarded as opaque. So if some of the light maybe passes through, but not all, and all light shadow is present, that is actually a translucent object. So, like I told you earlier, so it all depends on the object, on how it is. So there are those that can actually allow light to pass through. So if it allows the light to travel or to pass through it, so that is regarded as transparent. But if it gets blocked, if it blocks the light, or an object blocks the light and it casts a dark shadow, so that is regarded as opaque. But if it passes through but not, or and maybe a light shadow is present, that is now what we refer to as translucent. So that is all what determines what will happen when the light strikes either glass or wax paper or a book. So now it's all up to you to see which one actually allows light to pass through. Is it a glass or wax paper or a book? So which one now is either translucent and opaque or a transparent object? So that's what you actually have to determine. The other topic that I need to or have to present to you actually is why there's actually a claim. Why a claim like the sun rises up in the east and sets in the west is false. So there's such a claim that is normally indicating that the sun rises up in the east and sets in the west, but it's regarded as false. So basically, the Earth is rotating, and it's on its own. It owns its own from west to east. So the Earth rotates on its own, mainly from west to east. So the movement now of the Earth to east causes causes the sun to look like it's coming up in the east and going down in the west. But in principles or in reality, the sun does not move at all. So it's just where it is. But now what brings that what causes it to look like it's coming up in the east and going in the west? It's actually the rotation of the Earth. Now, because the Earth it rotates on its own, or because it's on its own axle, so which is now moving from west to east, and that movement of the Earth, that's what causes the sun to look like it's coming up in the east and going in the west. But humanly speaking, it looks as if the sun is the one that is moving, but it is due to the movement of the Earth. That's what I indicated earlier, and that's how it is. So the fact of the matter here is that the sun does not move; it only the Earth that moves. So the sun does not rotate, but it is stationary, while the Earth is rotating on its own axis. So it spins or rotating so fast. So this is why we don't even feel it or feel any vibration at all. So just because it rotates so fast. So that means the Earth is the one that is moving around itself, but not the sun. So that claim of saying the sun rises up in the east and sets in the west is false. It's actually now testified by this principle of indicating that the Earth is one that is rotating and it's on its own axles, which are now enabling it to rotate, while the sun is actually stationary. So the Earth actually rotates or moving around itself. We have now to look at on the topics of condensation versus evaporation. There's always a confusion between these two terms, condensation and evaporation. I've actually placed two pictures there just to illustrate to us what happens when and how. So you can see the movement of gas to liquid. That is actually condensation. and then the movement from liquid to gas, that is actually evaporation. So that's just a summary of it already, even without explaining anything further. So, but if we are to look at this in details, so evaporation and condensation, these are actually two processes through which matter changes from one state to another. So when gas changes from gas, or the state of gas, to liquid, that is condensation. So, but in condensation, matter changes from a gas to a liquid, like I said earlier, and all the matter is made of tiny movement or moving particles that are called now molecules. So you know those molecules that you always or that you might have looked at in chemistry or in physical science. So, but what matters here is that the gas changes to a liquid. That's condensation. Evaporation and condensation happen when these two or when these molecules gain or lose energy in the form of heat. So there's always heat between these states. So for it to actually change from one state into another, it is actually caused by the losing of heat energy or gaining heat energy that is happening between this matter, and that's how it results into either gas going into liquid and then forming clouds, or liquid being evaporated and then it gets into gas. So condensation is the opposite process of actually evaporation, and it involves gaseous water molecule cooling down to the liquid state. So usually it happens if water vapor is going up in the air, that goes up in the air, it cools down to form actually clouds. So this is what happens, but it's actually caused by the heat, and that heat is actually the one that comes from the sun, which results into all these processes. So now condensation, gas to liquid, evaporation, liquid to gas. Those are the changes that are actually happening between them, and that's how they result into these two processes. So those are the differences between condensations and evaporations. I've now placed also a picture here just to demonstrate how these two processes occur. As you can see, this is actually mainly the water cycle, because this already happens with the presence of water. So we have a water body and land. So we have water body here and then the land. So it happens on both. So from the water body, you have now a heat energy that comes there, and then you have evaporation, because it's also a combination of air. I mean, not air, but rather, when it's windy, we expect the evaporation to be high, evaporation rate to be high. So when it evaporates, it gets into condensation, and then after that, it forms cloud, and then when you have that change of state, which resulted into the formation of clouds after condensation. After sometimes you now have to experience what is regarded as precipitation or rain, hail, and or whatnot. So that's what happens. So same applies to maybe a lake, because the other one was either maybe an ocean or a flood plain, but you also have a lake or any other water body that is found on the land, or maybe a river tributary or a channel or a catchment. So you expect now to have plants also to take up some of the water through them, but they will now transpire. From transpiration, you have also water that is coming from either mountains. So that is now through the process of submersion, and you have the surface of water there. That's where evaporation is taking place. But some of the water some of the water is actually getting into the soil which is going to water table through percolation and then infiltration. So what will happen there after it reaches the atmosphere through at a point where it freezes 100%, and then it forms clouds, and then after that you have precipitation, which you now become which will come in the form of rain, and you have what is going to be called as runoff, either coming from runoff, water running off from the other mountains, and sometimes that also causes soil erosion. But all in all, this is how these two processes occur through typically through water cycles. Um, the other topic that I brought here is actually to look at the different digestive system component of the body. We have different digestive system component of the body here, so which is indicated here, starting from the phalanx, which is this actually regarded as a digestive system or an alimental canal. So you have the first part there, which is the phalanx, and then you have the other parts, which are oral cavity, that is the opening of the mouth, or in the cavity which is actually in the mouth. We have the uvula, you can see there, plus the tongue, but that is all found in the oral cavity. So the salivary gland, which is also found from the mouth, and that is produces mainly salivas. There are also some hormones such as parotid, the submandibular, and then sublingual, that is also found there. But as you know, there are also enzymes in the saliva that helps with the process of digestion of food stuff. So, but all the way from the phalanx, it gets into the esophagus, and then it gets into the stomach. The stomach there, you now also have the liver, and the liver has actually a gallbladder that stores bile. The gallbladder stores bile, and you also have the pancreas, which has a pancreatic duct, and then you also have a common bile duct. Bile duct is actually a tube or a duct or a tube that actually allows the bile to move from there into the either into the pancreas, but that is actually containing more of the toxic substances, which are actually filtered either from the liver or from the pancreas. You also have now the colon. The colon here it has different sections, which are transverse colon, ascending colon, and the descending colon. After that, you now have the cecum and then appendix. Appendix is one of the body part that normally has a problem. It swells, and then it can also burst. It should not be handled or diagnosed early enough. The small intestines, the colons, those are large intestines, but there are also small intestines, which are duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. So those are the small intestines. But after all, what you get is the apart from the when it comes to the last part, is actually the rectum, and then lastly the anus, that actually releases out all waste substances or waste stuff. So these are the digestive system or component of the body of a human. So that's how they are, and with different parts. So there's oral cavity, that's what you find in oral cavity, uvula and the tongue. The salivary, you find glands, you find the parotid, submandibular, and then sublingual. And then here you have small intestines, the duodenum, and the ileum. You have large intestine, which are actually the colons, and then the transverse colon, ascending colon, and then descending colon, and lastly the rectum, and the end part there is actually the anus. We also need to look at how different material degrade differently. How different materials degrade differently at different rates. So the term material breaks down refers to actually chemical changes that material undergo through the chemicals like acid, physical changes like wind or water, or by the process of decay, maybe by small organisms such as bacteria or fungi. So these are the organism that causes the material either to break down through decaying because of the processes in which they will go. But it also takes some material, maybe some years to break down, while others only take some few days, yet others take hours or minutes to sort of decompose. But this is mainly due to the fact that decomposition is dependent on the environmental where the material is being decomposed. So because sometimes the material, the environment, if it's a wet environment, material get decomposed much faster because there's moisture that allows or facilitates that process. But if it's in a dry environment, so those materials might take, if it's biodegradable, they may also take a little bit longer to decompose. But if it's moist, so it takes a little bit shorter period. So for example, look at how fast steel rust, mainly a form of decomposition that is actually occurring in humid salt air environment, such as maybe the coast, which is Swakop or others, compared to a dry environment like Windu. So rust is much faster in Swakop and Wavis Bay than in Windu, which is a dry environment. So that's what I was trying to compare. So the material actually degrade depending on the environment where they are. So that's what actually facilitates the process of at which, or the rate at which they will decompose. The other most important topic that I also had to look at or have to address here is the flowering and non-flowering plants. So basically, all flowering plants are advanced in the form, advanced in forms, and they have a vascular system. All flowering plants are advanced forms, and they have vascular systems. And the non-flowering plants, those ones are comprised both of non-vascular forms, or particularly the mosses, and the vascular form. So which are now the ferns and then the pines. So flowering plants, they normally bear the male and female parts either in the same or on different plants. So you can have a flowering plant that have both flowers, male and female flower parts on the same plant, or you can have one that has only a flowering plant that has only the male parts, whereas the other one has female parts. So this is also common in maize. So you can find that maize has a tassel at the top that has the male parts, and then the female parts that are mainly in the maize cob. The majority of flowering plants produce seeds for development of new plants. So this is what is happening. Normally, all flowering plants produce seeds with the purpose of developing new plants. The majority of non-flowering plants, with some exceptions, produce tiny spores, mainly just for propagation. Those spores are the ones that are used mainly for propagations. So seed produced by flowering plants are actually enclosed or found in fruits, while it's not easy. I mean, it's not even the case in seeds derived from non-flowering plants. So as you can see, flowering plants, they produce fruits, and that's where you find the seed in within that fruit. So, but that is not the case with the flowering or non-flowering plants. So in flowering plants, the sporophytes fate is actually dominant, whereas in the case of non-flowering plants, the sporophytes and the gametophyte are actually either independent, like I said, maybe in the case of fern, or the gametophyte phase is dominant, mainly in the moss. Those are different actually plants that way where all these sporophyte and gametophyte okay. These are different parts of a flower. A flower has different parts, like I have already explained. Here you have different parts now, such as the male part and the female part. The male part being the stamen, the anther, and the filament, whereas the female part being the stigma, the style, and then the ovary. So that is a pistil. And then in the flower also has petals, which can either be red, purple, or violet, any color, can be of any color. So now here in the ovary you find the ovule with its embryo sac, and then you have now the outer parts, which are the sepals, and then that is being raised up there by the receptacle, and then what normally the part that holds up there is the peduncle. So peduncle, receptacle, the green part here, or parts of the flower are actually sepal, receptacle, and then peduncle that holds it up there. But the main important parts here are actually the male parts and the female parts, and this is actually they are both found on the same flower, the stamen, anther, and then the filament. And you have now the pistil, stigma, style, and ovary, which are the female part of the flower. There's also an aspect of incline. Incline is actually incline glands. These secrete most water and salt and are used by the body for temperature control. This actually glands, but when they secrete mostly water and salt, but mainly they are used by the body to actually to control that. I mean to control the temperature. These glands are located around the body, but are mostly profuse around the sole of the feet. As you can see, when you step on the ground and then it's warm, you already sense that. But that's where the inclined gland is actually found or located, and maybe also and also in the palm of the hand and the forehead. That's where they are found. Normally, you find that you feel the heat either on your forehead, maybe the palm of your hands, and also the feet. So the sole of your feet usually sense all that. So they look like coiled tubes and spiraling towards the external or the exterior of the skin. So, but they actually glands. They sense all that, but. So they actually secrete normally water and salt around the body for temperature control. The other aspect is the other topic is on ecosystem and human activity. As we know, human activity normally influence the ecosystem negatively, especially when they perform in an excessive and unsustainable way. So humans normally play a great role in our ecosystem which can be negatively affect our ecosystems if they are not managed or utilized in a sustainable way. So, but one of some of the aspect human activity that are actually causing that is actually agriculture, industries, mining, and fishing. Plus now the issue of global warming, which is the global warming and then pollution, extinction of species, which are some of the consequences of such a human behavior or human activities that we get from either agriculture, industries, the application of fertilizer in agriculture, and then maybe the use of fossil fuel in industries, the mining of coals, and then fishing as well. Now, how to prevent the destruction of habitats and preserve biodiversity? What we need to do actually, we need to reduce and eliminate the use of household chemicals and pesticide, the use of pesticide and maybe herbicides as well. You need to actually reduce the use of that. And then we also need to reduce that by recycling as much waste as we can, and also maybe to reduce the amount of waste that we produce. That we can reduce that by recycling as well, and then we can also reduce carbon footprint, which is actually gonna be one of the best option because we have excess carbon in the atmosphere. So, but we can reduce that through carbon footprint. Choose also food that are locally grown and grown sustainably. So by so doing, we will now be able to prevent destruction of habitats or our ecosystem by preserving our biodiversity through all the strategies that I have actually alluded to earlier. That's all I had to present to you today, and I think this will help you to actually prepare quite well for your examination. And I thank you so much, and also wish you the best of luck for your examination. So please do not hesitate should you have queries maybe on any of the topic that I presented that you feel was not justice was not done, so you still have time to actually ask through the use of those contact details, either by calling or texting or email. Then we can take it on from there and see how helpful I will be to you. Otherwise, thank you very much and have a lovely day.